Ha, we did it.
Yep. How many bachateros does it take to join an Instagram live?
Exactly, huh, man? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Good, good, good. I like your background. You got some greenery.
Yeah, man. I had to come to the studio to,
Okay, okay. What
yeah.
studio is that?
It's called the Palladium. It's my friend Oscar's. He does
Okay, okay,
big salsa festival events.
okay, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. There's one in New York. There's two in Texas. There's one in San Diego.
That's amazing. How long
Yeah.
have you been there for?
So I grew up here,
Oh,
but
okay, okay,
I was in Puerto Rico for the last maybe 10 years.
okay.
And then I just recently came back just to spend time with family with my mom. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And family's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So, well, first off, thank you so much for getting the time together to really talk about, I think, an ongoing conversation that the community seems to really be having when it comes to bachata and how it's represented. I think a
Hmm.
big question that people are trying to ask is the role of people who have influence in the fusion community and what they can do to help, um, give voices a platform and a voice for people who really care about their culture and the
Hmm.
bachata name. And I think you're a big voice in that. Could you maybe share a little bit more about yourself for those who might not know about you?
So about myself, right? So I was born and raised in Houston, but with roots in Puerto Rico and El Salvador, right? In terms of nationality. But I grew up street dancing, right? So for me, bachata was not like a structured thing that just came into my life because it was a
Mhm.
hobby. I mean, I remember being uh, essentially like the quinceañera king from like the age of 13 all the way to like 20, man. It was like I would finish one quinceañera and then the next one and the next
That's
one and the next one.
hilarious.
Yeah, and then eventually it got to the point where they were like, "Hey, can you do the choreo for my 15?" And I was like, "I guess I don't know what I'm doing, but whatever, right?"
Yeah,
And yeah, man, I didn't really discover the dance scene until I was maybe about 22,
yeah.
21, 22. So that was about 15 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was never my intention to be what you would call an instructor, right? It was never an aspiration of mine. It was just like, oh, cool. Now I know a bunch of people that also like to dance. Cool. Let's see what this is about. Yeah, man. And then I think I didn't even know how to count yet, right? I didn't even know how to count music yet.
Yeah,
And somebody was like, "Hey, do you want to perform?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." I was like, "I guess it's not a big deal. I've already performed before."
yeah,
But yeah, after that, it just kind of became a part of everyday life, always at the studio, always at socials. Um, and then maybe around year 4 or 5 of being in the dancing, I got extremely sick. Um, I actually ended up in the hospital for like 2 weeks in ICU. I had a what they call walking pneumonia, and
okay.
so I lost a huge amount of the capacity in one of my lungs
Mm,
because of that. And so it took me maybe about 6, 7 months to get back to dancing, and I knew after that it had to be more about just a healthy lifestyle, actually trying to perfect my craft and
yeah,
so on and so forth, right? And then that's when I started going heavy into the performance teams and really like honing my skill, right? It wasn't just about, oh, it's in my blood, right? Like a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
us,
yeah.
right? It was like if
Mm,
I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it correctly, right? Like if I'm gonna be in this space, in the dance space, there are certain expectations when you're gonna be a performer or whatever. Um, and then eventually, right? And so funny thing was, right, back then, everybody was a salsa dancer. There was no separate bachata community,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was, everybody was a salsero or salsera, and we just happened to dance bachata, right? And so eventually somebody asked me if I taught, right? If I taught bachata, because Georgette and Troy were like a huge part of my development in terms of bachata.
Hmm.
They were essentially like my godparents in the dancing. And yeah, after that, I was like, well, I'm not a teacher, but I can try. And then I realized this takes a lot more than just knowing the counts and knowing the steps, right? It requires knowledge of how the human brain works. It requires charisma. It requires and being an
Multifaceted for
entertainer,
sure.
right? Like a lot of things, right? You got to remember that a lot of people come to dance to get away from their everyday life,
Yeah.
right? So only a small percentage of those are going to want to ascend to the next level in terms of skill and maybe become an artist and maybe become, the next superstar or the next instructor. But the majority of the people in the scene just want to have a good time. So you got to keep that in mind a lot, right? Like it's not just okay, you have to do it this exact way because you came to classes and that's wrong and this is right. No, right? Like that's what this whole conversation is about, right? Dance is subjective, but I think we're in that point where it's gone to some extremes, and the same thing happened with salsa, right? Where the original dance is no longer being represented in that scene correctly. And people are just tending to dismiss the opinions of the originators of this dance or the defenders of the culture, right? I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is we're more than happy to have conversations, but I think a lot of people tend to dismiss it because they just don't want to have it, or maybe their understanding of what bachata is completely different, and they just don't want to learn, right? They don't want to
Mm.
change the way that they dance, which is fine, right? It's you can
Yeah.
dance however you want, but I think just simply acknowledging, hey, I'm not dancing actual bachata, right? Cool. We're not asking you to change the way you dance. We're just asking you to
Yeah.
represent it correctly, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue in terms of not issue, but I think that's a big source of division when it comes to what are we
Mm-hmm.
calling bachata and what are we not calling bachata. And just to
Mm-hmm.
go back to what you were saying from the very beginning, like I have a similar experience. I remember my quinceañeras, Chabalan, next
Yeah.
to the quinceañera. And, just that experience and the cultural aspect of these dances that we do, right? The
Mm-hmm.
social dance world that me personally I experienced after like joining a salsa club back in college is where I started entering that like dance social space. But
Yeah.
culturally, like it's not something you count, it's not something you like take classes for. It's just something you do with your tias and deals and just really try to have a good time with your family, dance in front of
Exactly.
all your family, the trauma of having to dance in front of all your family members and dance with all the uncles and like kind of present and show for them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when you enter into this dance space, this is where I feel like it tends to be very labeled and tends to be very like it has to be this way, it has to be that way. And you're right, when it comes to social dance, people are coming to find a way to disconnect from their daily lives. And so when that disconnect, that space that they're looking for to disconnect in, is also a place of contention among the professionals and the peers of different opinions and things of that sort, then that space kind of gets skewed a little bit from actually being what it's meant to be, a source of connection, a source
Correct.
of community. And I think if we're going to really talk about community, we have to talk about the aspects that build that community. And that's why these conversations are
Correct.
so important. And you're right. I feel like a lot of people dismiss uh, these conversations, or either because they want to be ignorant to it, or maybe they feel like they're overly criticized,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't have the freedom to express. I think what you said really hits home. Is like we're not asking, or the big part of the bachata community isn't asking uh, to stop what they're doing. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of not misrepresenting and also including those who do represent. And I think that's a big key.
Correct.
Right now, I mean, as we go into this conversation, I know we have a little bit of an outline, but right now, I think a big issue within the fusion community is every new fusion that someone decides to create within their studio, within the curriculum, it's called an evolution of
Mm-hmm.
bachata. New names keep appearing, and people who carry bachata's culture are just watching it, something they love, get repackaged and
Mm-hmm.
handed to them as something new. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big source of issue when it comes to what we're calling bachata. Because when you go to a bachata event, or bachata artists are hired to teach and dance among their so-called bachata community, they don't feel welcome. And I heard they don't feel like they can dance their music. They feel like they have to learn a specific style in order
Correct.
to be able to dance with the other dancers. What are
Correct.
your thoughts on that?
I think really right. One of the things that most people don't take into account, right, is would a quote unquote, right, which we I think we wanted to talk about that is whether or not we call it traditional, right? Um, but what is considered traditional, would a traditional dancer be able to express themselves and have a good time at your event,
Yeah.
right? I think that's a huge indicator, right? Because um, like you said, right, this is the context of specifically bachata and Latin dancing, right, is that we do this with family, we do this with cousins, brothers, sisters, aunts, moms, dads, uncles, right, friends. And then there is obviously the context of going out and dancing and seeking the attention of the opposite gender or the opposite sex, right? It's
Yeah.
those were the two contexts that I grew up dancing in, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't about, okay, I want to look cooler than the next person or I want to get viral videos. It was, I'm either dancing at family parties or I'm going out to the club and I'm looking for women, right? And so those were the two contexts that I grew up in, right? And so now we're in a space where what's considered old and traditional, right,
Hmm.
is the only way you can actually truly experience either of those, right? But when we're talking about, for example, the sensual side, I actually asked a person, someone very, very close to me yesterday, would you feel comfortable dancing sensual with your brother or cousin? Right? And it just was awkward immediately, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so it tends to, the reason why I dislike the term sensual is because it, the implication is that bachata in and of itself is not sensual, right?
Hmm.
That's what you're basically saying is that, okay, we're calling our style sensual because bachata in and of itself is not sensual, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, is it actually sensual or are you sexualizing the dance like what happened with Kizomba, right? Like Urban Kids,
Yeah.
because Kizomba is not like is danced like that in Angola, right?
Yeah.
Where it originates from. Same exact thing that happened to Kids is happening to bachata, right? And so it's just like you're slapping the term sensual on it, right? To not make
Yeah.
it seem lewd and obscene, which some of the things that they do are beautiful, but would you be able to do that stuff with anybody who's not your romantic partner, right?
Yeah.
Granted, even if you're single, right? If you're single, cool, be free to do whatever you want, right? But would you be able to dance this with your family, right? Which is where bachata originates from, right? People were just dancing this stuff at home in the mountains and los campos, right?
En el patio.
Exacto, exacto, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's where a lot of the Latin essence is disappearing from the quote unquote Latin dancing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I
And
think I,
so
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, no.
No,
And
I was just gonna
it just
say,
no longer feels like it no longer feels it feels too segregated, right? Because now, like I said, back in the day, it was we all danced salsa. Some of us danced bachata. Then kizomba made it onto the Latin dance scene, and it was incorporated. And then some of us from bachata went to kizomba as well, right? And so we could dance all three, but we just used to try to squeeze in those songs in the same space, right? And it was fun. That was like you don't ever go to a Latin party and they just play salsa all night or just bachata or just cumbia.
yeah,
It's all mixed, right? And so some of that I wish was still it still existed in the Latin dancing.
yeah. I think what you said also hits home when it comes like, can you dance these dances with people that have no awareness of what you're dancing, like when it comes
Yeah,
to the specific style
yeah,
or specific curriculum or methodology behind. So the question becomes, what's the thing that connects all of us? Like, right?
yeah,
It's bachata,
yeah,
and if that's not what's connecting us, then it's what's these styles are what is dividing us,
yeah.
right? And I think everything that comes from these styles is an opportunity for people from different cultures to experience it within their own culture. And I think that is a big pro and a big benefit as to what is now established within the fusion
Hmm.
of different interpretations of the music and things of that sort, and different
Hmm.
types of creation. And so there's a lot of conversation that goes into uh, trying to understand what we're calling bachata and also trying to understand what bachata means to someone, right? The
Correct.
word bachata, even if it doesn't necessarily tie back to the Dominican Republic.
Hmm.
For some people, there is an association that bachata means community. Bachata means an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to perform, an opportunity to earn money.
Hmm.
There's a lot of associations to bachata outside of the culture that have brought a benefit to its international growth.
Hmm.
However, I do think that uh, that's where when you had said earlier in one of your videos I saw, where's that line of
Hmm.
like, how do we keep calling it bachata, but not use bachata for its economic impact, its visibility, right? The reason people tie their style or whatnot to bachata is because there's a big market for it.
Hmm.
There's a big market to sell your product, your teaching, your product. I mean, at the
Hmm.
end of the day, it's that commercialization of a dance that's now in become an industry around the
Hmm.
world.
Hmm.
And so I think going back to kind of the this growing trend that we're seeing when it comes to BachaZouk
Hmm.
is for me personally, it's an opportunity to try to do it right from the start.
Hmm.
You know, I think because it's new, because it's trendy, because it's forming its identity, what I think is frustrating to me, specifically when it comes to BachaZouk, is people are using the name but aren't incorporating the bachata part to it. And
Hmm.
also, it's like we're committing the same mistakes that we saw years ago when fusion started growing beyond just the Dominican Republic.
Correct.
And for me personally, when it comes to BachaZouk, it's an opportunity for people to really do it right from not from the start, but also include those who have so much to give. And I think that's the key thing. Is it's
Hmm.
like I saw this email recently from like people that I used to learn from,
Hmm.
and it's just like going on. It's like, oh, the people who don't go with the change or don't evolutionize, they get left
Hmm.
behind, and they have only a few hundred followers. But
Hmm.
all these artists that are developing and pushing the genre and the dance
Hmm.
are hundreds of followers and getting booked and blah blah blah. And I'm like that type of language and that type of approach to this evolution of bachata is what's going to like mute what people have to give within the
Yeah.
bachata community.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, right? So I think you touched base on several things, right? Which I think maybe we can dive deeper into the other one, but just to make sure I don't forget. But when we talk about evolution and fusion, right? We have to actually define what each of those things that we're fusing is, right? To identify
Yeah.
where the melding point is, right? And so as a dance, right? I'm not talking about culturally, emotionally, symbolically, right? As a dance, how would you define bachata?
Are you asking me personally?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, how would I define bachata
Or how
as
would
a
you dif
dance?
how would you differentiate to someone what bachata looks like from salsa, right? Because if
Okay,
I,
okay.
if I have to explain someone, if I have to explain to someone, right, that doesn't have any knowledge of dance technique or dance structure, I'm going to tell them step, 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 tap, step, 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 tap,
Yeah.
right? Most people would agree that that's bachata. And that is exactly what is absent from a lot of these fusions, right?
Mm. Well,
Right. And
actually,
so
I
go
would
ahead.
say though, yes and no, because yes, I think it identifies step, 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 tap, but it's not just the step, 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 tap. It's how you do those things, the cadence, the essence, the like. Anyone can do the Cupid shuffle to the left, to the right. You know what I mean? That doesn't
Correct, correct.
necessarily make it bachata. But I think when it comes to fusion, people are like, okay, I can do all these crazy things to the music, but as long as I'm doing step, 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 tap, it's bachata. And I think that's where the issue is. I think
Actually, no, right? Like I think the majority of us, right? It's the bad experience for us as tradition, quote unquote, traditional dancers is the music representation, right? Because
uh,
you will get a repertoire of remixes and super modern music, right? Not to to degrade or talk down on modern music, right? But it does not allow us to do our job that we were hired to do to the best of our abilities, right? People want to dance authentic traditional songs, right? But if we get one song out of every 20, right, maybe one per hour at an event, is that truly giving us the tools that we need, right? And then what happens, right, is that the central and fusion dancers, right, they don't know how to dance this music because they're not accustomed to it, right? So the
Too
dance floor
fast.
click,
It's too,
yeah,
yeah.
but that's also a two-part thing. DJs are not well versed, right? And there's
Mhm.
also just as much ego in the DJ world as there is with the dancers. They will play what they think people want, right? For out of their ego, right? It's like, I don't want to play the same songs that somebody else played. Cool, I get that, right? But your songs suck, right?
Yeah, and then the
Like,
one two bachatas that they actually play is super fast as hell, or
right?
it
I
doesn't
don't want to
actually.
dance that all night. I don't want to dance like, 140 beats per minute all night. I want to dance some Zacaria Ferreira, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Romantic and sensual, right? Soft and slow, right? But I think that's also lends itself from the fact that there's this common misconception that traditional is just fast footwork, which is not, right?
And
I
I
think
think that,
anybody,
yeah,
no, I think anybody that's been exposed to dancing with Dominicans or dancing in and around bachata, right? Like just even just regular street bachata, most people do not have crazy footwork. They just do not, right? And just the same way you can dance open position, right, with your grandma, right? The same way you can close up the position, right, and make it more sensual and dance with your girlfriend, right, or your boyfriend. And right, it's so versatile, right? And I think this is where people, the same way that people have assumptions about central and fusion, right, which a lot of us do on the traditional side without actually properly studying them, it's the same with bachata, right? They think it's only fast footwork. You only want to dance old songs, right? Like you're always judging us, right? There's all these common misconceptions, but because people are not willing to sit down and have those conversations, that's where the disconnect happens.
I agree, and that's why this conversation that we're having, I think, is super important. I don't really feel as if it's like a debate. I think that's the current. Um, I feel like it's creating a lot of contention within the community because it seems to be like you're right, I'm wrong, right?
Yes.
And I think if we change that approach to try to understand and really understand the conversation that we're trying to create and the direction we're trying to go, I don't think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the people quote unquote traditional side of things aren't necessarily trying to stop people from being creative and doing what they want. It has to do with the name and the representation of that name. And I
Correct.
think what you said earlier is right. Is like this. There's this image that's propagated within the system in the industry of bachata that traditional is old and the up and coming is new, and so you have to
Mm-hmm.
learn the up and coming. I think at some point I remember saying that BachaZouk is an evolution of bachata, and you don't want to be left behind. And that's the way it was marketed. That's the propagation. And me seeing that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, it's like, please don't tell people that,
Yeah.
because that's not personally how I would market BachaZouk. It's
Mm-hmm.
not how I would personally describe BachaZouk. And
Mm-hmm.
BachaZouk for me, what didn't start it as a fusion of dances. It started as a fusion of communities, as an opportunity to culturally exchange. Because
Mm-hmm.
the way people operate, the dancers, how they operate within the bachata community is very, very different of how they operate in the Brazilian Zouk community.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, the reason I created BachaZouk and I did my first social and I started organizing was because I was a part of that group, kind of being like a mixed child of
Mm-hmm.
like I love being a part of both and I love
Mm-hmm.
representing both, and I want to create a space where people who also identify in that way can be
Got it.
able to experience both. Because a lot of times you can ask any dancer that loves bachata and Brazilian zouk, they feel split. They feel divided because they have a group of friends that are Brazilian Zouk only, and then they
Mm-hmm.
have a group of friends that are bachata only. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they either get invited to events or they have to choose between festivals and socials of wanting, oh, I want to dance bachata. They have like this little period of just bachata, and then they kind of
Hmm.
switch back and then they do just zouk. And for me, it's like one, it's hard to feel like you can experience and enjoy both, but it's also hard to flip flop when your focus is divided in that way. And so BachaZouk was an opportunity, I think, for me to really have that be a place that kind of put everyone together. And so
Hmm.
BachaZouk really for me started as a fusion of communities, a fusion of people. And I
Okay.
think that's what the foundation needs to be before we even talk about fusion of dances, before we even
Exactly.
talk about a curriculum. Because if the people don't know each other, then they're
Exactly.
not going to want to dance with each other. And that's the
Exactly.
current issue that we have is, especially within the Brazilian Zouk community, Brazilian Zouk community don't really want to associate with bachata. But a
Hmm.
big part of that has to do with what is being called bachata and what
Exactly.
is represented as bachata and what Brazilian dancers see as bachata. And when
Exactly.
they have a way of dancing compared to what sensual dancers are doing, they're like, I'd rather keep my own thing. Like, I don't want
Correct.
to associate with sensual dancers,
Hmm.
which is fine, which is fair. But me knowing bachata and what I've come to experience and identify as bachata now, it's like it reminds me so much of the Brazilian animation, joy,
Hmm.
energy. In Spanish, we say sabrosura, but in Brazilian Portuguese, we say gostojinho. It's that
Hmm.
yumminess, that delicious of feeling of just moving and being a part of the community and connecting. I think that is the part uh, that I think is super, super important to distinguish when it comes to how those dances are related and how they're not. We have a few
Correct.
questions from the bachata crew. You refer to bachata, you mean sensual fusion dance. Yeah, generally when I say when I'm referring to the fusion, I will say sensual. When I say bachata, I'll say bachata. And when I say BachaZouk, I'll say BachaZouk. But I think that's a big thing. Something that I had actually wrote in a post is like, should we still keep using the traditional terminology, or should we just call it bachata and really try to push that representation? I know I said a lot, so I'm gonna hand it off over to you.
And right, and these are conversations that we're also having offline, right? Is there's just a large group of us that are truly trying to defend the culture, right? And not necessarily because it's my culture specifically, right? It's just I grew up around bachata culturally, but it's not my flag, right? But
Yeah,
they're close enough to me in the sense where I've lived amongst these people, I've considered them brothers and sisters, they've accepted me as one of their own, right? And so the at the very least, what I can do, even if my style was, let's say, not the actual Dominican flow, it was modern or whatever, but the very least I can do, um, as a sign of respect and as a thank you to my Dominican brothers and sisters is represent bachata accurately, right? The way that they understand it. Because we've even talked about this, right? Where some people stay quiet in the middle of the debate, right? I also have to try to understand the people that stay quiet because they may not think the same way we do, right? They may be thinking something else. So I try to understand all, parts of the spectrum where anybody who goes to the Dominican Republic, even if they're just trying to dance bachata, they'll be like, pero ya tú eres dominicano, right? Like they'll be like, oh shit, you're already Dominican.
hey,
Like
hello, okay.
you don't got to dance like they do, but as long as you're making an effort to incorporate yourself and integrate into the culture, right, and be a part of them, they're gonna receive you with open arms, right? And so why do bachata dancers, right, not feel the same reception at sensual and fusion events, right? Yes, sometimes there is one or two maybe traditional, right, artists, but when it comes time to the social, it doesn't happen, right? We don't get the representation we need in the music. Also, with the Jack and Jills becoming a huge thing now, um, Jack and Jills will play traditional music for the sake of saying that that they are competing in
They're
bachata,
inclusive.
right?
Yeah,
What happens the rest of the event? Not a single song,
yeah. Hmm.
right? Not a single traditional artist on those lineups.
Yeah.
So it's just like, right. And I think we're also in another period in the dancing now where there are truly organizers that have nothing to do with the dancing. They're pure businessmen, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I can make money off of these people dancing. Cool, right? Instead of it being the usual progression where you're a dancer, then you become an instructor or an artist, and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing events or organizing events, right, for your community, and then you start doing bigger congresses and festivals. That's usually how it went. Now there's truly investors and people just creating events for the sake of making money. And they're like, I'm going to hire everybody who's viral and so on and so forth. And whoever
Yeah.
has the most likes and the most whatever, I don't care about culture. I'm not even going to worry about that. Like, it doesn't make me money, so I'm not going to worry about it, right? Cool. I understand that.
Mm.
Do what you want to do, but don't be ignorant and don't pretend like you don't hear what we're saying, right? And that what we're saying is not valid, right?
Yeah. I
That's what
think,
happens.
and actually, as so, Brazilian Zouk has slow growth, and it has, I think, has this topic of Brazilian Zouk in bachata has really, um, really brought a lot of attention to the community. But Brazilian Zouk community, they hold themselves to a standard in terms of the pride and the protection against of what is represented as Brazilian Zouk or
Mm-hmm.
Lambada or anything of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that I lack in seeing that I'm seeing now within the bachata community. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
this sense of pride and desire for the culture to be represented correctly is a negative thing. And I think a lot of people are treating it as a negative thing, but it's not. I think it's a positive thing towards these conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what you said is also true. When you have a bachata event, but you're not playing any bachata music for the people that you're hiring to be there to teach
Mm-hmm.
bachata, then they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to feel included in their own space of what they would call bachata, you know?
Correct.
And so to throw them a bone of like one song every 1 hour that they would consider bachata, it makes them less inclined to want to be a part of the event. And it creates less opportunity for people to actually understand and experience bachata the way it was meant to be experienced.
Correct. Correct.
Um, I think the same is happening within BachaZouk, if I'm being honest. I'm starting to see these events pop up, and you see all these artists, all the virality, all the people who can really bring people to the event, and you
Mm-hmm.
see like one Brazilian couple, like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, again, the same mistake is happening
Mm-hmm.
where we're using the names, the things that were built, because at the end of the day, the reason bachata exists is because of the Dominican Republic, and the
Mm-hmm.
reason that Brazilian Zouk exists is because of all the Brazilians that put the energy and effort to travel the world and really share their culture and their love and their dance. And
Correct.
now there's this big market for it, and then the people who help bring it up aren't the ones teaching it. You know what I
Correct.
mean? Like, and that's where it's like the same issue is starting to propagate on the other side. And so you have Brazilians and Dominican people being frustrated about how the trend is going within BachaZouk. JR, I think, asked a question earlier, if he's still here with us, of do you think they could ever coexist? Both worlds can actually coexist. And the thing that most people don't know is that bachata and Brazilian zouk actually share a common ancestor in bolero.
Mm-hmm.
Bolero influenced Brazilian zouk the same way that bolero influenced bachata, and you actually hear it within the rhythms of the bass guitar within bachata is the same pulse we dance to the different types of genres of music that we consider Brazilian zouk. Brazilian zouk, it's boom, chick, chick. Bolero is that boom, 3/4, which for me, I would consider the complementary, between the bass guitar and the secondary guitar, where the secondary guitar is going tuna kaka tuna 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 kaka, and that rhythm is complementing the bass. That
Mm-hmm.
same rhythm is the rhythm and pulse we dance to in Brazilian zouk. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
connection. Like BachaZouk isn't some random creation of style. For me, it's an opportunity to learn about more of what that pulse is. And for me, as I start to learn more about how bachata is danced,
Mm-hmm.
especially bachata on three, that is where I really feel the feeling of Brazilian Zouk. I took a private with Sid. I respect him so much. He's the Desi Dominican. I'm not sure if you know of him,
Hmm.
but as he was teaching me more about the musicality of dancing bachata on that bass guitar rhythm, I felt he was teaching me Brazilian Zouk. And it was such
Hmm.
an interesting phenomenon because he doesn't know Brazilian Zouk at all. But the way
Correct.
he was teaching me the structure and everything, it's like that's where the connection is. And I feel like that is an opportunity that is still left to be explored.
Correct. Right. And I think finding the commonalities amongst us as human beings definitely helps us connect, right? After traveling the world for the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years, right? We're more alike than we are different, right?
Yeah,
We always try to divide, right? Division is easier to control, right? If we were all united and said, no, this is bachata, organizers would listen, DJs would listen, right? But no, I mean,
yeah,
division makes it easier to control everybody, right? But even amongst those commonalities, right, there has to be something that defines it in order to call it that and to call this, right?
yeah,
It's just like the martillo pattern, right, on the bongo. The martillo pattern is from Cuba, right? Or even as far as Africa, right? But it was modernized with the bongos, which are truly, right? We all understand that drums are of African origin, but there's drums that are specific to Puerto Rico. There's drums that are specific to Brazil. There's drums that are specific to Cuba. Those being the timbales and the bongo, right? The bongo is the one that we all use. Salsa, merengue, bachata, right? But just because we're using all the martillo pattern doesn't mean that I can dance one style over another style, right? Like I would not be doing salsa on top of a merengue, right?
yeah,
Or on top of a bachata. And so it does make it easier to connect the dots from an understanding perspective. But then what layer of the commonalities, or at what point do we say, okay, these are all the things they have in common, but then at this point is where they separate, right? Like this is why it's this Zouk is this, or Brazilian Zouk is this, and bachata is this, right? So
hmm,
I think in general, right, if you trace the music back far enough, we're all gonna have some common ancestor, right? But at some point, there's so much influence from other regions or other styles that it truly just does just become something else, right? And I think that's all we're truly seeking is just the recognizing that, hey, we're doing something else now, right? It's no longer bachata, and that's okay, right? We're not trying to demonize you. We're not trying to tell you don't ever dance like that. But if a solely bachata dancer went to your event, would they be able to survive? Would they be able to coexist with everyone else? And I want to say in 75 to 80% of central and fusion events, they would not be able to.
yeah. Because they have to learn the exact language and code that people are dancing in order to really be able to connect. And so that leaves people the choice of, do I stick to the one or two events that are actually doing bachata, or do I have to learn this stuff?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you said this at some point. It's like you have to learn it in order to be able to socialize and dance with the people that are there, because otherwise it's like you're kind of required to in order to be accepted or to
Correct.
be able to feel like you dance bachata.
Correct. Right. And also, right, we dance in dance spaces, right? This is also a caveat, right? And I think the fact that in the dance world, in the dance scene, right, the Latin dance scene, right now, Central and Fusion are the majority, right? But conservatively speaking, right, let's say around the world, there's maybe between 2 and 6 million people that are actively a part of the dance scene. Maybe they take a class here and there, maybe they go to socials, maybe they go to festivals, right? This is all inclusive of everyone in the dance scene, maybe between 2 and 6 million people. People that are actively going to festivals and traveling all the time, and the artists and the instructors, I want to say maybe about 300,000, right? Somewhere right there. Maybe
Yeah,
between 300,000 and 500,000 people. Comparative to all of the Brazilians that understand what Brazilian Zouk is, and all of the Dominicans and Latinos that understand what bachata is, right? You add those up, and we're talking about how much, right? Like the population of Brazilians and population of Dominicans and Latinos that understand what bachata is, right?
Hmm.
Millions upon millions upon millions of people, right? And so I think the perception in the dance scene tends to be a little bit skewed because of that fact, right? In the dance scene, sensual and fusion are the majority, but on a global scale, it's not, right? It's a small bubble in comparison to the amount of people that dance bachata and Brazilian zouk worldwide, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of Brazilians that dance Brazilian zouk
Actually, so
without
here's a
taking
fun fact.
classes.
So here's a fun fact. A lot of Brazilians within Brazil don't know what Brazilian Zouk is.
Oh,
And
interesting.
here's there's a reason behind that
Hmm.
because and it's actually there's work being done to reconnect
Hmm.
lambada and Brazilian Zouk are now going hand in hand now.
Okay.
Brazilian Zouk was similar in terms of interpretation and musical creativity, or sorry, artistic creativity. And so, what we come to know as Brazilian Zouk is not what Zouk is, and that's
Hmm.
where the confusion right now is. Zouk itself is a French Caribbean dance,
Correct. Correct.
right? So what happened was it got fusion with a bunch of other things, and then at some point we created an identity. Actually, I think they had. I was learning this. I was going through like the history and with in educating myself behind Brazilian Zouk. Is at some point people were like, okay, we can't keep calling it Zouk. Some people try to do Lamba Zouk. Some try to
Hmm.
give it all a bunch of different names, but we can't just call it Zouk because it doesn't actually come from Brazil.
Hmm.
So that's when people, and that's why it's important for us to call it Brazilian Zouk,
Hmm.
because it distinguishes it from what already existed from a culture that isn't Brazilian.
Correct.
Lambada, on the other hand, is very Brazilian.
Hmm.
Lambada, you tell an average Brazilian want to go dance lambada. Like lambada itself also means party, just like bachata
Hmm.
also means party.
Hmm.
So the thing here is that uh, Brazilian Zouk and Lambada are starting to really merge together into one community. A lot of people that consider themselves Brazilian Zouk dancers are also now considering themselves Lambada dancers. In fact, one of
Gotcha.
the Lambada leaders says that if you dance Brazilian Zouk, you can say you dance Lambada because the
Okay.
structure and the feeling behind it carries different meaning. And so I feel like it's like has similar challenges that we see in bachata in terms of its representation and what it
Hmm.
means. But what I see different is Brazilians are a lot more willing to talk to each other and
Hmm.
a lot more willing to kind of come together and be like, okay, let's try to fix this.
Yeah.
Um, but in bachata world, now that bachata has different meanings to different people across different
That's the
countries. I mean,
key.
we have Russians dancing bachata or their version of bachata. We have Europeans, like just like a whole array of people that aren't Dominican taking something that they experience with fusion or with not and trying to make it their own based on what they know. And
Yeah.
so, like, that's where a lot of the confusion happens in fusion. The confusion
Yeah.
within fusion, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'll hand it back to you.
And that's the super important detail, right? Is the fact that when the culture is not yours, it is so easy to say, I can do whatever I want with it. I'm
Yeah,
just having fun. It's just fusion, right? It's just whatever. It's just this or it's just that. Or it's what I feel bachata is, right? And so I'm going to call it bachata without truly ever respecting the opinion and the culture that provided you with that word to use to even begin with, right?
yeah,
So because they don't have so much stake and investment. They're not so invested into a dance culturally. That's why it becomes so easy for people on the other side of the world to change it and do whatever they want with it and repackage it and relabel it, right? Because if somebody were inside the Dominican Republic doing that, right, even if it were a Dominican, Dominicans would eat him alive or eat that person alive. They'd be like, They'd be like,
¿Qué es lo que estás
I
haciendo?
they'd be like, pero ve acá, manito, ¿qué es eso lo que tú estás haciendo? Right? Like
Exactly,
they'll
exactly.
be like, ¿qué es el disparate? Right? Like un disparate is just like a clusterfuck, right? So it's just like the Dominicans are very prideful, very happy people, and they welcome everyone with open arms as long as you respect them culturally and as a people, right? Um, and so why do they feel that they don't get that in a world that utilizes the name bachata,
Yeah.
right? Like their opinions are the first ones discarded. Generally, you will not see traditional artists at the top of a flyer, right? It's
Mhm.
always the sensual and the fusion dancers,
Yeah.
right? And then, like you said, the point of every fusion now is all of a sudden or personal style, right? Because I can have my own personal style or swag within a fusion umbrella or within a specific genre, right? I might not look like anybody else dancing, but that doesn't mean that now it's a new branch of the tree.
Yeah.
You know,
Correct.
it's not a new branch on the tree. Let's say, for example, the big one, right? Bachata influence,
Hmm.
right? Not to specifically name drop anyone, but where is the bachata influence, the bachata in bachata influence? Because it seems like it should be more appropriately called Brazilian Zouk influence, right? Or whatever it is that, right? Because
Well, I think that's a careful
they're
claim. Careful. I don't know enough about bachata influence to really speak on it.
yeah.
What I do know is that the dancers themselves believe in creating connection, and that's kind of like the source of it is like just
Mhm.
being able to musically interpret any kind of music that can be layered with instruments that can simulate bachata, but the idea here is that it's a methodology and an approach that they take when it comes to partner dancing, not necessarily bachata. Um,
But that's the groundwork for all Latin dancing classes, right? The whole idea is to develop connection and really understand each other and communicate via the music. That applies for salsa, that applies for kizomba, that
yeah,
applies for bachata, right? So that's the commonality, right? That doesn't mean that it's specific to them just because it's a huge part of their culture, right? Or their mantra. But do you consider that someone dancing Take Me to Church, the rock song,
is
and
dancing bachata? Probably not.
and no and doing mostly Brazilian Zouk movements, would you
Yeah.
consider that bachata, right?
So we have to categorize what we consider Brazilian Zouk movement. So, and that's I think the issue right now
Mm-hmm.
is what, and that's where the misinformation is like, what do people consider and view as Brazilian Zouk? Well,
Uh-huh.
if they're seeing BachaZouk incorporating a bunch of head movement with no bachata and just all the advanced things you see within Brazilian Zouk, that an
Mm-hmm.
average beginner dancing Brazilian Zouk or lambada will not learn.
Nope.
That's not what they're going to learn the moment they
Mm-hmm.
enter that space. But what happens is like all those things are marketable, sellable, right? And so what do when you can't be the headliners in a market that's already existing? You create your own market, right? You
Yeah.
take everything that is attractable and desirable
Mm-hmm.
from Brazilian Zouk, and then you repackage it and you say, I'm gonna teach you BachaZouk,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what we do. Uh, okay, cool. That means we're gonna include bachata, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Right? uh,
Right.
so then what you get is Brazilians being like, "Yo, that's just Brazilian Zouk," and so then people are like, "Oh, that's what Brazilian Zouk head movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rotisserie, Tawaya, like
Yeah.
tilted turns, like all these things." And then all the Brazilians are like, "Yeah, you're just doing Brazilian Zouk without the foundation."
Yeah.
And then you got the bachata people who are like, "Okay, but where's the bachata?" You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so that's where it's like, what's happening? And
Yeah.
what really is happening is money, and
No, of
and
course.
ego and fame and all these things, and it's taking a name that that quite frankly was meant to be used to do it right from the first start, from the
Correct.
beginning, and to then use that as an opportunity to sell yourself.
Right.
And I think the issue for me and what is disheartening is because that was never the intention for me for BachaZouk. And what happens now is that these conversations are meant to kind of create that clarity as to one,
Mm-hmm.
what Brazilian Zouk is, what the purpose behind BachaZouk, the brand, and what
Mm-hmm.
my intention of doing it is. And that is uplifting Dominican and Brazilian culture in one unified
Mm-hmm.
space. And if that were to include the fusion of dances, great. But me, when I first started, what I considered bachata was actually essential. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had learned and taken certifications because people who are very passionate about dance and social dance want to feel credible. They want to feel like they're showing that they're putting in the work to learn the things and do the things. And that was one of those people. Like what I
Mm-hmm.
considered bachata was what I was learning and being taught in the central fusion space. And so I propagated that idea. I
Mm-hmm.
propagated this is bachata, this is not. And so when I started doing, trying to experiment with what BachaZouk and the fusion meant to me, it's like what I was learning in Central was contradicting what I was learning in Brazilian Zouk in terms of anatomy and execution and whatnot. And so I had to choose. So I chose Brazilian Zouk. But if I took
Mm-hmm.
Central out of the equation, I asked myself, okay, what's my base? And
Mm-hmm.
that is when I realized I don't actually know bachata. I don't actually know how to dance bachata by
Yeah.
myself. I don't know how to dance bachata with someone who doesn't know all these fusion styles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, okay, I need to put in the work to correct
Yeah.
what I was understood as bachata, but
Yeah.
didn't realize until I made that connection. It's like, oh, like there's a reason I can't dance to the music. There's a reason I can't do pasitos, right? And I was resistant to it because I didn't want to feel like everything I learned was wrong,
Yeah.
right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing for a lot of people who do fusion right now is they don't want to feel like what they've been doing has been wrong, and they
Correct.
don't.
Right.
It carries a lot of shame. It carries a lot of like, what have I been doing all these years? I mean, you got people doing this for 10 years and still teaching the same things that bachata people are saying. That's not bachata, and so like that's where the like
Correct.
the vision and the shame comes from.
Right, and that's an ego thing, right? You had
Hmm.
enough, right? You had enough self-awareness to understand that you could not let your ego get in the way of you going back and starting from scratch, right? Most people are not willing to say, I'm wrong, right? That's just in general right now we're in a time in the world where people will not admit they're wrong, right? They will stand their ground because they refuse to be wrong, right? And they refuse to have conversations. And what's happening a lot with us, right? And even if I comment, like for example, a couple of weeks back, there was an issue with a Russian dancer named Dennis, right, where I respectfully commented on his video, right, and I got blocked for that comment,
Yeah,
right? I even said, "Yo, you're a dope dancer, right? But let's just call it what it is. That wasn't bachata." And any organizer that's allowing someone who didn't do bachata to win a bachata competition really needs to revise their rules, right? If it's just a freestyle competition, cool, call it that, right? But how can you say you're having, as an organizer, right, and as a
hmm,
judge, hosting a bachata competition when there is literally no requirement for there to be bachata in that competition, right?
yeah,
Or part of the dance, right? And so, right, but it's the the lack of willingness to have those conversations and just say, I don't like what you're saying, so I'm going to block you, right? That's
yeah,
just a very common theme nowadays on social media. Cool, you don't want to talk to me, right? That's fine. But then I take that as a sign or as your statement of, I don't care what about the culture. I don't care about what you have to say. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do and calling whatever I do bachata, right? Cool, fine and dandy, right? But then don't pretend like you're innocent, right? When you were never
yeah,
willing to have the conversation initially, when we were talking on good terms, right? Like that I think that's one of the things, right? I'm never going to attack somebody right off the bat, right? Unless I've personally felt attacked. And even then, I'm usually trying to understand where that attack is coming from, right? Before I
yeah,
respond. But I have no reason to hate this person. I have no reason to insult them, right? But maybe they're just a product of the system that we're talking
yeah,
about, right? It's just
They are.
And Carlos, actually, Carlos from Carlos and Susan just posted a video the other day talking about you cannot fight the system from the outside.
Yeah.
You have to promote change from within, right? And so we as quote unquote traditional dancers, we cannot just attack folks from the outside and expect them to open up the gates,
Listen. Yeah.
right? And so how do we find that middle ground, right? And so these are even within our spaces. We have these constant topics of some people want to go to war and some people want to stay quiet. Some people are in the middle where like, hey, we have to respect but we also have to be firm in our message, right? Um, but going back to what you said about the money part, right? You notice the vast and drastic difference in the type of content that and fusion and sensual dancers put out, right? Because it's a production. It's almost always high quality cameras, lights, smoke machines,
Mm.
right? The whole 9 yards, right? To make one
Yeah.
video. And then you got us traditional dancers in our fucking Crocs and chancletas, right? Like with a t-shirt, right? Like this is because to us, we don't need a studio, we don't need lights, we don't need the fancy cameras to dance bachata. That's not the essence of bachata to us. Obviously, we do it in nice spaces when it's warranted, right? If you're going to go out for a night with your
Yeah.
family or with your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, but we dance bachata in the supermarket, right? Like it's not a weird thing for us to
Yeah.
do, right? And so I think that also drives some of the money and attraction towards Central Infusion. It's like you have these super high quality videos with like all the effects and the great editing and the great camera handling, right? And that's what goes viral, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it goes viral within the dance scene, right? It does not make people outside of the dance scene think, oh yeah, I fuck with that. That's bachata, right? No,
Yeah.
I guarantee you, most Dominicans and I want to say most Latinos, because even some Latinos, right, that I've encountered, they do have the same opinion as the fusion and sensual dancers, right? They're just like, no, this is bachata. You guys are just antiquated, and you're dancing
Yeah.
music that like dead people music, right? It's that música de muerto. They be saying that, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, sir, I go out here in New York, or I go out in Miami, or I go out in Dominican Republic, and we got thousands upon thousands of people dancing esta música de muertos, right? So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, so what are we really
It,
talking
it,
about, right?
it's the messaging that gets propagated in order to better sell and position what the new thing is, right? And the bachata crew had said something. It's like they feel like it's just been rejected a lot of times for many years by the Central Infusion communities,
Yeah.
and so it's really surrealist for them that there are bachata dance events with no bachata,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what you had said was right in that people that come into these bachata spaces and are saying this is bachata, what you're doing is old, has to do with the fact that the rate at which music produced as or labeled as bachata
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really resemble a lot of what Dominicans would listen to. You know what I
Correct.
mean? And I think
Correct.
that's a big, big, big part of their argument, of our argument. I wouldn't really consider it my argument. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say that because of the music that's being developed, and it's part of the reason bachata as a label grew so much, is
Mm-hmm.
because musicians and artists that were veering off of the route that was already established, created a void for people to be like, okay, what do I do to this? Because there are
Mm-hmm. Of
songs for example, Pinto Picasso
course.
or Dímelo Cupido or like all these DJ Husky, right? There are songs that when you listen to it, there are a lot of bachata parts, there are a lot of bachata instruments and rhythms, but there are a lot of other influences in that. And I think
Correct.
that's where a lot of the fusion people thrive and the desire to dance to that kind of music. And that's why they consider, what Dominicans would dance to antiquated because this
Mm-hmm.
new rate of what's being produced tends to be a lot of mixed elements that aren't necessarily bachata. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a big part of the argument of the fusion community is like, okay, like during this space when there's just lyrical music, what the hell do I do? I can't dance bachata. Like I
Yeah.
can't dance bachata to that. And so
Correct.
that's when the influence comes in and BachaZouk and all these things because those interpretations require a certain type of skill in
Hmm.
order to be able to dance to it. And that's a skill that Brazilian Zouk artists are really good at is dancing to lyrical music. And
Correct.
products like Influence also kind of like cater to that market of dancers that dance to just music that honestly is beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful music out there that isn't bachata and like Take Me to Church as you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
or Ordinary, or just like a bunch of other music that you can really connect to and dance with someone but isn't bachata. But you can still create a system methodology behind it so that your partner dance, social dance, extends beyond just bachata music as a genre. And I think
Hmm.
there's value in that, but it's the how and why that I think is important to distinguish.
Correct, right? And it's kind of like the outcast syndrome, right? Where you are the one weird kid at school, right? I'm not saying people that do fusion are weird, but I'm saying you're the one person that doesn't identify with anybody else, right? Because maybe you have a different background, you have a mix of backgrounds that make up your personality, right? And it would be amazing to find a system that supports you and makes you feel like you're
Correct.
at home, right? Cool.
Mm-hmm.
But, right, whoever is in charge of that system, right, which I don't think there's any one specific person
Yeah.
now at this point that's in charge of that system, but there are pioneers that are unwilling to take that step to relabel something, right?
Correct.
Because it would affect their image and also, right, their following, right?
And
People would
there's
be like,
searchability.
right, yeah, exactly. Right. It's just like I understand why people put bachata in their username, right? And it's just like I get it, right? Because when as soon as people search bachata, your name is gonna pop up,
Correct.
right?
And that's
But
what's happening with BachaZouk as well, by the way. There's people that have never taken Brazilian Zouk classes, participated in Brazilian Zouk events, or learned Brazilian Zouk that are attaching their name to BachaZouk in order to be more searchable or
yeah,
visible.
yeah.
And and that's like great, promote yourself, that's awesome,
Hmm.
but also take into account what you're doing and like what that means in terms of people who are coming to you and learning from you.
Yeah.
But I continue with what you were going to say.
Right. And so, like I said, there's not one specific person in charge of this, but there are four elements to the dance scene, which I think are crucial, right? And so we start at the bottom, right? What responsibilities does each one have in order? Because we can pose a lot of problems, and this is one of the things I always drive home whenever I talk to my community, right?
Mhm.
Um, is because I'm a project manager, right, by profession, right? So
Oh,
I
really?
I
I'm
don't
trying to get into
yeah,
project management.
yeah, I know. We'll talk about
Maybe
this.
you
We'll
can
talk about
refer
this
me.
after. Of course. And so I'm a project manager, right? And I don't need problems, I need solutions, right?
Yeah.
I don't need you to complain. I need you to tell me what can we do to fix this and how can we,
Mhm.
course correct, right? And so we have four parts to this. And this was a conversation I had with several leaders in the industry recently in Las Vegas, right? That are very near and dear to this topic. And so there's four parts to it, right? Which is attendees and regular dancers that have no aspiration to become artists, right? They're just having fun.
Yeah.
You have artists and instructors, you have DJs, and then you have organizers, right? Shit rolls downhill, right? Like what the organizer wants is what everybody else is going to do. So if the
Correct.
organizer says, hey, DJ, you got to play this music because that's what I need. Hey, artist, these are the workshops I want from you because this is what the people want to learn. And then the attendees are just having fun, right? They're just told where to go and when to be there, right?
Mhm.
So what responsibilities do I ask for from each tier? From the attendees, have an open mind,
Mhm.
right? That's all I can ask you. Have an open mind and also be conscious of the fact that you're not the only one at an event. If you're getting the 8, 9 songs per hour that you like to listen to, don't fucking complain to the DJ when we get too traditional songs. Like when we get too old songs, we've been having to sit here and listen to the music that you truly like, right? And the remixes for 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Take a break for 2 songs. Go get some water, right? Like you're not gonna die. Relax. That's the
Oh,
only thing I can ask of attendees, right? Because I've never been to a community where they say we don't have enough sensual, we don't have enough BachaZouk, we don't have enough fusion. Every community I've been to, all I hear is we need more traditional. We don't have enough traditional.
yeah.
Literally everywhere around the world, and that is the case, right? Because we are the minority. We truly do not have enough bachata around the world, right? In
Yeah.
most communities. Second, with the artists and instructors, simply be honest with yourself about what your product is, right? And if you're gonna call it, if you're gonna sell fusion, call it fusion, right? But make it clear that this, what I'm doing in this context is that style of dance, and what I'm doing here, that's where the bachata comes into play, right? But if you really want to understand bachata, right, and dance bachata, you need to understand the roots, right? That does not mean you have to dance exactly like Dominicans do, right? Because you can never dance more Dominican than the Dominicans, right? It's just something they grow up with because they're not thinking dance, they're thinking feel the music and whatever happens happens, right?
Yeah.
Which is something we may have in common, right? And that's something I preach in all of my classes. Whatever you do, just do it with feeling, right? Don't
Yeah.
do it because it's a count or because you think it looks
The
cool.
choreo
Do
or the
yeah,
combo.
do what you feel, right? Then you have the DJs. DJs have just as much ego as artists and anybody else, right? And they refuse to play the music because they're like, I don't want the dance floor to be empty during my set, so I'm not going to play any traditional. And then
Yeah,
they're
that's a big
not
thing.
and they're not well versed, right? They may think, oh, this song sounds high energy and it sounds cool, right? We don't listen to that song. I
Hmm.
promise you. That dusty ass song you found on Spotify that has like 10 streams that nobody else has, we don't want to listen to that, right? We want to listen to the bangers and the classics and the stuff that we want to sing out loud, like at the
Hmm.
top of our lungs. So be mindful of that, right? You cannot call yourself a bachata DJ if you do not have a good repertoire of all styles of bachata, including bachata vieja, bachata
Yeah.
moderna, right? Bachata romántica, bachata de cabaret, which is like carrandales style, because there's specific songs that are played at carrandales, right? Like the super fast footwork, the super crazy, just everybody doing whatever they want. But then there's other songs, the more mainstream old bachatas, the classics that are played in just everyday normal places, right? So
Yeah.
that having that cultural understanding that within the traditional umbrella or the bachata umbrella, there's multiple different categories, right? Not everybody dances bachata the same in DR. And
Yeah.
lastly, the organizers, right? We understand it's about money, and most events are barely breaking even, right? They're barely getting out of the red, right? If they do break even, they lost money, right? So
Yeah.
because most organizers don't even have enough to pay themselves. But if you're gonna call your event a bachata event, at the very least, have some sort of true bachata representation there, whether it's with the music, whether it's with the artist, right? But if you're not, don't call it that, right? If you're gonna have nothing but Zouk, BachaZouk style dancers, right, that only do the extreme of BachaZouk, but there's nobody teaching foundations, there's
Yeah.
nobody teaching true bachata, there's nobody teaching the groundedness and the connection with the floor, right? There's nobody teaching hip movement, right? Is your event truly a bachata event, right?
Yeah.
And that would make it so much easier to categorize where do we go, right? Like if I know, okay, they're calling that a sensual event, cool. I know what to expect when I go there,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But if I go to a place and they say bachata social and it's still just pretty much a sensual event with the bachata word slapped on it, right? To me, that's a misrepresentation of what that event is, because I would be hoping that I would get some kind of bachata that represents me at a bachata social, which is usually rarely the case.
Yeah, and I think creating a system is something a system out that disconnects from the word bachata is a key solution with trying to create that. And so using labels, I think, is super, super important. Because I think that, like you said, it's the only reason people keep including the word bachata in it is
Mhm.
because that's what people identify with, even if they're not dancing bachata, and like that is how they search for events. So like some sort of label that helps people that enjoy the fusions, enjoy particular styles that live outside of bachata is going to be a conversation that the fusion community needs to make in order
Mhm.
to still propagate their events and still be able to advertise and promote, but without having to depend on using the bachata name.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the step we have to really take in order to really give bachata the space and air it needs to grow internationally by those who are involved and represent the culture. And a
Correct.
big part of that is including, if you're going to do a fusion event and if you want to use the bachata name, include and invite and hire people that want to represent their culture, want to
Correct.
represent the culture they're very passionate about. And so
Correct.
I think that's solution one. For me personally, I made a video about this, but I think another solution is that people who represent bachata and who actually care about the culture and wanting to spread that, I personally think they should stop using the word traditional. I
Mhm.
think that using the word traditional kind of segregates and separates the identity of bachata from itself as
Correct.
another style that people can learn. You know what I
Correct.
mean? And so then people are like, "Oh, I really want to learn traditional. I want to learn this style." But
Mhm.
like this style of what? You
Correct.
know what I mean? Bachata. So I think that's a big part, and trying to create an idea that bachata is not bachata central,
Mhm.
BachaZouk, whatever. It's
Mhm.
bachata central influence or
Correct.
whatnot. And if people want to live outside of that bubble, they should create a system that is meant for just that.
Correct,
So
right? And so I'm of the opinion, right, when if we're doing a little diagram, right, you have bachata with little arms, right, going out, and but everything is in the foundation of bachata, right? So and you can probably anybody who's ever been to one of my classes, right, specifically the intensives that I do where we go from the ground up, how to move your body, how to step, how to learn the what I consider the 10 basic steps that are core to bachata, then how to do that in partner work as well as musicality and everything that goes along with that, right? Is that I don't care how you dance at the end of the day, right? But if you're going to call your dance bachata, we all need to have something in common, right? So if you are teaching bachata, right, we all need to have the same foundation, right? So if you have babies that are coming into the scene that don't know any better, right? They don't know the difference between salsa and bachata, do not teach them sensual or BachaZouk as their
correct,
foundation,
correct.
right? We should all have the same foundation, right? Just call it bachata. Do you have to look like a Dominican when you're dancing? Absolutely not, right? Because that takes years of developing and dancing in and around them, right? So the core understanding of what bachata is should be at least for the first 3 or 4 months, right? Or at least the first 2 or 3 cycles, level one beginner or absolute beginner, beginner plus, whatever you label your courses. Then once they truly know how to move their bodies, okay, now they have a preference of which style. I kind of like the more groundedness, more street style of traditional bachata. I like kind of like the more musicality, sharp movements, refined movements of modern. I kind of like the more flowy, sensual stuff, right? Cool. But what happens? We all have the same foundation and we can all exist in the same space and understand each other. Because right now, what happens is that I will go to events that are primarily central foundation and they do not understand what I'm doing. Right. And this is coming from somebody who
Yeah,
this is coming from somebody who dances multiple styles. So I can survive, I can adapt,
I I have the
right?
similar experience.
Right. And so because I'm a good leader and I know how to adapt to the follow, I can make it work. But imagine a primarily only bachata dancer trying to lead a sensual who has a completely different foundation. It's basically like me trying to dance bachata, with somebody trying to dance salsa, right, at the same time.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge disconnect, right, because the foundation is completely different, right? And if the foundation is completely different, are they truly the same dance?
Yeah, I think that's a effort that has to be led by the bachata, bachata community.
Hmm.
Because I think leaders within the bachata with its Dominican roots and the culture, they have to get together and they have to say,
Yeah.
this is our foundation. I
Hmm.
think that's a necessary step in order to signal to the fusion world if you want to be a part of bachata and want to call your dances bachata, it has to include these foundations.
Hmm.
Personally, I think that's what Brazilian Zouk has done. And I think that's why a lot, doesn't matter where you go, Brazilian Zouk foundations are the same. And I think that it has, delayed the growth, but longevity is a lot more important than short bursts of success.
Hmm.
So I think that's a effort that I think the community can make. I think another
Hmm.
thing is, aside from hiring more Dominican artists and being honest with what you're advertising, which is what you said, um, I think if we're going to start offering certification programs for our style and whatnot, and you want to call it bachata or you want to associate it to the bachata market, it should
Hmm.
include rooting it in the foundation. Whether that's a
Correct.
foundation that you've taken the time to develop by studying and learning from Dominicans and the culture, or that's a foundation that soon enough, hopefully, the bachata Dominican community can establish, that has to be a part of it. Because the moment
Correct.
that you start certifying instructors to to teach your style, to sell it as bachata, but there's no foundation, they're just going to propagate the issue,
Yeah.
right? They're going to propagate and they're going to, it kind of trickles down. People that want to make something of themselves and want to feel credible in what they're doing, certify themselves with their favorite artists that are offering the certification programs, and then spreading their methodology, their word, and all these things. But then later down the line, realize what they're doing isn't completely as accurate as it could have been,
Hmm.
then that's where I think the issue gets propagated. And for me personally, I think that again, it's a something that BachaZouk can fix, but it has to
Yeah.
be something that uh, is done now, and which is why I'm doing the work to have these conversations, to do talk with the community and really find people who really value the values behind BachaZouk, which is unite, innovate, and celebrate, right? Unite the
Correct.
community, innovate through your creativity while respecting the roots and celebrating the people, the culture, and all the elements that make this community what it could be.
Correct.
So I think that's another thing that we can do, and another thing we can do is stop calling every fusion style an evolution of bachata.
Correct.
Like,
Right. And
yeah.
and so on that note, right, I think there's a huge um character development kind of checkpoint where you learn to accept new information and say, you
Hmm.
know what I understood to be my truth is no longer the truth, right? And I'm a
Hmm.
science person, right? So I believe in evolution. I don't believe in Adam and Eve. I don't like, right? Like for me, that's why when we talk about evolution, I'm like, what is evolution, right? Do you even know what the definition of evolution is? And evolution is the adaptation of an organism to its environment over an extended period of time, right? Evolution in
Yeah.
animals does not happen from today to tomorrow. It happens over thousands and
Yeah.
millions of years, right? And so let's say, for example, right, the original question that was posted with the promo for this interview is BachaZouk an evolution of bachata?
Hmm.
Just like Dakota said, right, there's a difference between something that's culturally rooted and something that's studio created, right? I think it's very understood that anybody who's looking to fuse bachata and zouk is because they're most likely in a studio oriented space,
Yeah.
right? If you had, for example, a huge community of Dominicans in Brazil or vice versa, right? A huge community of Brazilians in the Dominican Republic and a new dance was born out of that, I would consider that a true evolution, right? Because
Hmm.
you truly do have a melting pot of the two cultures, and it's inevitable, right? It's just like, damn, all the Dominicans learn how to dance Brazilian zouk, all the Brazilians learn how to dance bachata, right?
Yo, that would
And it's
kind of
just
be a
like,
dream.
dude, that would be amazing, right?
Yeah, that'd be
But
amazing.
I would be like, you know what? Under the understanding of what bachata is, hey, there's a subgenre specifically in the communities where there's a lot of Brazilians and a lot of Dominicans where they dance BachaZouk because it was just born out of the melding of the two
Mhm.
cultures, right? That I would consider an evolution, but something that is forcibly fused out of preference, right? That by definition is not
Yeah,
evolution, right?
correct.
It's a creation, right? It's not to take away from the beauty of the creation, right? Your baby, it's still beautiful, right? We acknowledge that it's beautiful. A lot of what the sensual and fusion dancers do is actually extremely difficult from a technical perspective. And a lot of us on the traditional side would not be able to do that, right? That's that's all good and well, right? We are not trying to take anything away from your creation or your dance or your personal style or your evolution, right? But it's simply acknowledging, right? At what point has your creation strayed so far from what bachata is that you still feel the need to attach the bachata name to it, right?
Exactly.
And at
Yeah.
that point, if you're still attaching your name to something that's completely foreign, right, to bachata, then it's about the money, right? It's about the being
Hmm.
wanting to be associated with what's hot. And
Yeah.
right now, bachata is hot, right? Like people want to dance bachata, they want to do Latin dancing. And so, right, I get it from a business perspective, but it's still that would be technically considered appropriation, right?
Yeah. That for me personally, that was my goal when I started and established BachaZouk in July of 2022. That in cultural exchange, right? Obviously, I mean, and it would be amazing if for whatever reason Brazilians all immigrated to Dominican Republic and vice versa.
Oh, they would
But
love it.
BachaZouk,
They would
I
love
know, right? I'm gonna start dreaming about that. But
it.
BachaZouk was an opportunity for that cultural exchange to happen, not because you force the dance or you force a methodology on the dancers and telling them this is the
Mhm,
evolution of bachata, learn it because otherwise you'll be left behind.
mhm,
No, this was an opportunity for which I've done, hire Dominican artists, hire Brazilian artists, have them meet, have them exchange, have them
mhm,
learn about each other. Oh, what's bachata for you? What's Brazilian zouk
mhm.
for you? And like have the dancers see that and be able to be like, oh, like the professionals, the people I aspire to are starting to do that. And
Correct.
so I want to do that too. And that's a trend I'm starting to see now. As
Yes.
much as Brazilian Zouk dancers are resistant to it, Brazilian Zouk artists are taking an interest in bachata. The
Hmm.
key question becomes is what are they learning and coming to know as bachata? And
Correct.
that's what I want BachaZouk to be, a source of place of this is bachata. This isn't a
Correct.
fusion, this isn't central, this is bachata. And then you can learn bachata the way it's experienced and danced in the Dominican Republic, and you can layer it with everything you already do beautifully in your own dance. I see a trend where Brazilian Zouk artists are going to realize that connecting with the bachata community or what's considered the bachata community is not only going to bring them more opportunity, but it's also going to bring them a chance to also bring their culture to a space that might not know much about it besides
Correct.
rotisserie and toalla. You know what I mean? Like
Correct.
it's an opportunity again to do it right from the start and give people a chance to experience each other. And for people who have such a distaste towards bachata, can
Hmm.
really learn what bachata was meant to be and how it feels because both of those dances, like I said earlier, is very sabroso and very
Yeah.
costeño. So
Yeah.
uh, I think I think that's the direction that BachaZouk is going to go. And as it grows and as I hope that I continue having these conversations with leaders within the bachata community, we can make it so that the Dominicans and people that represent the culture understand BachaZouk is not trying to appropriate with what already exists. The BachaZouk I built and I'm building and establishing and connecting and creating is meant to uplift Dominican and Brazilian culture and the people.
Hmm. Correct, right? And this says a lot about you as a person, right? And the fact that you were willing to have this conversation. For me, grants you basically whatever support you need from me and anybody who thinks like I do, right? There would be, it would give your opinion more weight than somebody who just truly does not acknowledge what we're talking about. Because, like I said, there's not many people that are willing to sit down and have these conversations or admit publicly that they were wrong at some point or their truth
No.
was not accurate, right? We're not asking people to go on Instagram live and admit that they've been wrong or, hey guys, we want public apologies for your transgressions. No, that's not what we want, right? It's very simple to start incorporating um, movements, right? And even like with some big names that I've done privates with, right? I'm not going to put names out there, but that I've given them privates on the foundation. And then the next time they do a workshop, I see them incorporate the movement that I taught them, right? That's truly traditional, a traditional movement in that context, obviously a little bit more stylized to their adaptation of bachata, but that's how it starts, right? We're not, you don't need to start from zero, but it's okay to start incorporating something right into your
Yeah.
repertoire to truly represent bachata again, right? Because you're not selling dance at a certain point when you're an artist, when you're like a headliner, you're selling a dream, you're selling an image. People want to look like you. They want to
Yeah.
dress like you, they want to look fancy like
Exactly.
you, they want to look exactly like you. So like Ataque la Alemana sold romance, right? Alex and Desiree sell happy bachata, right? And sabrosura, right?
Yeah.
Then Daniel and Desiree sell the sensuality, right? And Corky and Judith as well, right? So they're not necessarily selling dance, right? When you're the main artist, right? But
Yeah.
there's a lot of right B tier, C tier instructors that are maybe not as popular, but they're still a part of the equation, and they're teaching this in their classrooms, right?
Yeah.
Right to their students, and so it's okay to say, you know what, there is room for me to grow as an instructor and and to have more cultural awareness. Maybe I was wrong in the past, but it's not because I chose to be wrong. It's just the system that I was adopted into.
Yeah.
That is okay, right? We don't need you to have to go through penance, right?
Yeah. Purgatory.
Yeah, purgatory, right? To pay for your sins.
Yeah.
But at some point, right, everything comes full circle, right? Because if
Yeah.
we don't course correct right now, the two communities are already pretty
Yeah.
significantly divided, right? It's gonna get to the point where they're gonna have to just be independent of each other completely, right? If you actually want bachata, this is the event you have to go to. If you want sensual and fusion
Yeah.
and and BachaZouk, you have to go to these events, right? We would never be able to coexist. But I think regardless of
Awesome.
style, it starts on the dance floor. And if you're not able to exercise what you learn on the dance floor, we're never going to coexist. And that starts with the organizers and the DJs. If they're not playing music for everyone, we're never going to be able to coexist.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I honestly, I also, I mean, I know you said peer, like it flows down, but honestly, I think it's an ecosystem.
Yeah,
If the teachers aren't teaching, then the students are not going to want to learn it. Then the organizers have to position to what the students are learning and have to bring the
yeah,
artists, and then the DJs adapt to the it all flows into one ecosystem. And so
correct.
I think every part has to do their part in order to really try to find a solution towards this divide that we're
Yeah,
currently experiencing. And
perfect.
I think as we
Perfect.
come to a conclusion on this topic, which thank you again so much for your time in creating this conversation. I'll post it so everyone can see it who didn't miss
Sure.
it, who missed it. But I think at the end of the day, there's some artists from India, which I honestly believe India is becoming such a powerhouse for bachata.
Hmm.
Um, the thing they said that I really appreciated was bachata should be rooted, not diluted, and like I think that's a perfect.
That
Let me.
is, yeah,
That actually it was Amanda and let me see. I hope I don't mispronounce his name, but I want to give recognition here. Amanda and Rishab. I think that's how you say his name. But they that that they I from what I understood, they made that phrase, and
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful way to conclude.
Put it on a t-shirt and I'll wear that t-shirt everywhere I
Honestly, yeah,
go.
they should make a T-shirt, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll start sharing it around.
And honestly, man, right? Like I think above all, right? I mean, even outside of the economic part, um, dancers like to work with organizers that truly represent them and they feel like they can have these conversations with, right? Because if I feel like I cannot bring my true opinion to an organizer, chances are I probably won't work with them, right? Because I
Yep.
want to have clear, I like clear communication. But I think this is honestly a great opportunity for you, right, as an organizer and as the creator of this style, right, to truly create a format for not just the people that already like the fusion, but for the people who do not know about the fusion, and to have a meeting point, right, where they learn how to dance bachata fundamentals, they learn how to dance zouk fundamentals, but then you also have the artists that
Yeah.
show the fusion of these, and then
Yeah.
you have
That's the
basically
goal.
like, right,
Mhm.
and this is how you create unity, right? Because you cannot have people coming in to just learn the fusion. They have to learn these two items. But if they don't have the ability to, or the context or the format that allows them to, that's where it becomes difficult, right? Because in a lot of those places, they don't have bachata classes or instructors. They only have the fusion style,
Yeah, and
right?
that's the work I've been doing since September of 2024, and it's constantly evolving. But just trying to bring dancers into both foundations and then finding a place where they can meet in the middle at the very top,
Yeah,
right, from the
yeah,
bottom.
yeah,
And I think that that's the work I hope to continue to do now as I start to um, right. I've been in my community for 8 years, developing and honing in and like training and all those things. I think now I'm at a point where I'm like ready to say hi to the world and say, hey, this is what BachaZouk means to me. This is what
yeah,
I established it to hope to create. Because right now the direction it's going, it's just going to repeat the same mistakes, and I really don't want that. So
correct, correct.
thank you again for the conversation. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the opportunity to really talk about what BachaZouk is, and to clarify for anyone who hasn't tuned in or is ready to see, uh, BachaZouk was never meant to be an evolution of bachata. That's not what I consider it to be. It's meant to be a place, a home for dancers that really, really, truly enjoy both, and give them a source and an identity and a community to be able to do that with others who also enjoy the same dances and the cultures, the social cultures behind them.
No, and thank you so much for the opportunity, right? I think this is just the beginning of a lot of dialogues that need to occur, right, in order for us to truly understand each other. And for anybody else who may be wanting to have these honest conversations without feeling attacked, I'm more than happy to sit down, even if it's privately or via DM or whatever. Any dancers that would like to have these discussions or have just more insight into what our experience is, I'm available for anybody who wants to sit down and have a chat.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. All right.
You said you're based in Houston, yeah?
Yeah, right now, but I'm actually relocating to Colombia in the summer.
Okay, but when? Because I'm actually coming to Houston next weekend.
Shit, I leave to Australia on Wednesday.
No!
Yeah,
Okay,
man, I
okay.
leave to
It's so
Australia.
close, so close. Next
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
next
yeah.
time, next time.
No, but we'll connect, man. I'll come up to
For sure.
DC. Yeah, yeah. All right, man.
Okay, okay. All right,
All right.
brother. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you. Thank you,
All
man.
right,
Take
thank you.
care. Bye bye.